Hi, everyone. Oh, good, it's on. I'm Rey Pamatmat. Where am I sitting?
I don't know.
I was thinking I see
Over
you.
here.
Hi, I'm Mike Liu.
And we are the co-directors of the Maui Writers Lab, the largest collection of Asian American playwrights ever assembled in the history of recorded time. These are a few of the other members of the lab. We're actually, I don't know how many active members we have
I think
right
we
now.
have 29.
We have 29 members. We are a powerhouse of Asian American theater. And I'm just going to ask them first to introduce themselves, starting that way, going this way, and just say your names and say whatever you're working on right now or whatever play you're excited about right now.
Hi, I'm Rehana Lew Mirza, and I'm working with Mike on a musical about Bhangra. I'm excited about that. And I'm excited about Tiger Style.
I'm Naveen Choudhury, and I'm working on a play about the science of female orgasms.
My name is Dustin Chinn, and I'm working on a play about Vietnamese sandwiches called Colonialism is Terrible, but Banh Mi is Delicious.
I'm Mike Liu, and I'm working on this.
I'm Rey Pamatmat. I'm working on a crazy 3-play cycle about gayness.
I'm Hansol Jung. I'm working on a play about Korean comfort women and American soldier having a baby together.
I'm Clarence Coo, and I'm writing a play about a guy who's really into bird watching and is also trying to find love.
Hi, I'm Nandita Shenoy. I am working on 2 plays kind of at the same time, one about female sexual desire and the other one about high school reunions.
So we're going to start talking about the play that you just saw tonight. I'm going to ask Mike, how are you? How'd that go?
I'm doing well.
Good. Why don't you tell us a little bit about where Tiger Style came from and the journey from getting it from a first draft with the lab to here?
So Tiger Style, I started writing it in 2013. I was going to Juilliard at the time, and I think it's a play that's like kind of a long time in coming because it's just got a lot of like sort of my personal background in it, and a lot of kind of like what I'm wrestling with culturally, and but I delayed writing it for a really long time because I think it's probably sort of common experience among all of us that you get into like MFA programs or sort of in undergrad theater programs, and there's like a certain expectation of like what you should be writing and kind of like what like Asian plays are supposed to look like, and so that really shut down this like well of personal experience that I had that I didn't know how to kind of unbox, and so the Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother came out, and the sort of backlash around that really sparked in me like a desire to sort of refute the backlash, because I felt like a lot of the discussion around that book was not by Asian Americans, and it was sort of two-dimensional, and so that's where the play came from, and it I brought in pages at Maui, and it went to the O'Neill in Connecticut, and its world premiere was at the Alliance in Atlanta, which 4 of the actors that were in this production were in that as well, and Merich von Stockmagel, who's a longtime collaborator, directed that, and then we're sort of doing return duty here along with several of the designers. And then it recently had a production at La Jolla Playhouse as well with a different team, and so but despite all that, a lot of people don't really know that plays are constantly evolving, and it's not just sort of this finished product that you see. So all the actors put in like a good 15 new pages today, and it keeps on changing as I sort of refine the argument of it.
When is your opening night?
The 26th.
How much more are you going to change?
Well, I'm gonna have to.
Why are you putting them through this?
I'm gonna have to ask Rehana, and then when she says it's good, then I'll say okay.
You're almost there.
Okay. Seriously though, as the co-director of the Maui Writers Lab, just in hearing about all of the work that we're working on, as you can see, we write a lot of different plays, and so just from your position as co-director of the lab, where do you see the position of Asian American playwriting right now, and what role do you feel the lab plays in that?
I'm incredibly excited about the state of Asian American playwriting right now, and so we have there's no tenure on membership, and so I think when did we join, the three of us, the best class, like around 10 years ago, right? Yeah, and so we take applications every 2 years, and so now I've been through 5 application processes, and I feel like the stuff that we're wrestling with and the sort of range of plays that we're creating is really expanding, and I think that I know that Mai has a lot to do with that as both like a sort of beacon for talented writers, and also as like when you just bump against what writers, smart writers are kind of wrestling with and sort of iterate on it, that I think that we have evolved a lot because of the lab, but I can't sort of put my finger on exactly how that happens or why.
Do you mean the theater itself has evolved, or we as writers have evolved, or?
I think that we as writers have evolved, and that like the sort of canon of Asian American plays is deepening and is going in really exciting directions. And I know that having such a large collective plays into that.
Great. And I just want to, before we go to the audience, really we would like you guys to ask us questions or to hear about your experience with the play or, with Asian American playwriting. But before we do that, just if anybody else at the lab would be willing to talk about the role the lab has played in your careers, or even just coming to lab meetings every week.
Every other week?
Every other week. From September till May.
Yes. I'll just say that I think that the lab has been a really great experience for me, in that it pushes me to keep creating work, partially because Mike yells at us 10 more pages every time that we come in. So that's very helpful. But it's really wonderful to have a community of people who know your work and who support you and know your quirks and your strengths and your weaknesses, and can really respond, because there is no expiration date, so to speak, on the lab. I feel like we've developed these really long-standing artistic relationships and collaborations that have been incredibly productive and useful and supportive. So I feel really lucky to have this group here.
Anyone else?
Well, what's so liberating about it is that nobody says, "Where's your Asian play?" But if you do bring in your Asian play, they're like, "Okay."
Yeah, and I think I want to actually touch on something that Nandita said, which is that membership in the lab is for life, which is not typical of most writers' labs. And a big part of that is because as writers of color, it's, other writers will sometimes have like a series of residencies or of opportunities to develop their work, and that's not quite as common for writers of color. And so once you're a member of the Mai Lab, you're a member for life, so you always have an opportunity to develop work, to hear it read, to bring in new pages. And that's something that I think has been really vital to me as a member of the lab.
And there's also most of the productions that are that we mount in New York are coming from what we're working on, like from week to week, and so that continuity, I think, is atypical of most writers groups, because there's sometimes a wall between sort of like, you guys are writing this thing over here, but it's never going to get produced, as opposed to you better really polish this thing over here, because we're going to put it up, and then if it's not ready, you're fucked. So.
Whoops. Live streamed on HowlRound. Anybody else?
I think Mai also, it's interesting, the Writers Lab has its own ethos from the theater, but the theater really picks out from the lab and sort of pushes the playwright forward and always like pushes their career forward. I know Mai, as a home for us, is where Mike and I first met, and then we got married and all that stuff. But we also got our first productions out of Mai as well, which was sort of also like birthing babies. And then we also are now jointly on a shared Mellon residency with them for 3 years, which offers a salary and health insurance. So they're always really looking out for opportunities to branch out and help the writers, live and sustain their art.
Cool. All right. So we're going to open it up to you, and really you can ask any of us questions about the lab. We can talk about Tiger Style. And actually, why don't we just start with, are there things in Tiger Style that stood out for people, like things that made you laugh or things that, reminded you of your own life, which I'm sure it did? Yes. So sorry, I'm supposed to repeat the questions. So the question was that there are a lot of very current references in Tiger Style, and whether Mike planned on continuing to update those references.
So just from like a practical kind of business standpoint, when your play, like if it ever gets published, that's sort of like when it gets locked, and then you're kind of not supposed to be continuing to work on it. So as long as there are productions like this where I have a chance to see it live and have audience response, I'm going to keep on working on it, because these politics are ever changing, and so is my kind of I think that the argument around it is like kind of crystallizing for me still. And so if this goes to another city, I'm going to keep on working on it, and then like if I publish it, then it'll get frozen at that point.
Any other questions? Let's go to the back and then up here to the front. Oh, thank you. That was just a comment about. I'm sorry. Did you have a question or? So the comment was that the Huntington has done many plays in its recent 15-year history about learning to adjust to America, and that it was refreshing to the gentleman in the back that he didn't sense anger to be at the core of this play, but he wonders if Mike had a comment on that.
I don't know. Am I angry? I mean, I guess what I will say is that there's a lot of comedy to it, but it's meant to sort of disarm in order to kind of dissect something deeper. And I think that while these questions of race are really ever present for me and sometimes angering, I think that if you just sort of live in that place for at all times, I don't know that that's necessarily my sort of like what sparks me to write, but I mean there's a lot of emotion in it for me. So yeah.
Cool. And yes. The question is if there are any further changes coming up, or what Mike wants to work on in Tiger Style.
I mean, this is only the third preview of it, and so I am learning a lot from kind of the audience response, and because several of the collaborators on this worked on it a year ago, like we've lived another year and sort of have more perspective on the play, and so I don't know specifically yet but I'm just listening every day to the response and trying to really, make it as tight as possible. Right now, we're just looking at the ending a little bit and making sure that it's kind of landing how we want it to. Yeah, I mean, I feel like previews are such a luxury because it's a period of experimentation that you can really gather a lot of feedback and try to piece together how people are reacting. I what? Yeah, that's right. Right before, are you talking about like in Act 1 or? So at the end of the La Jolla Playhouse production, Rehana actually was what? Well, you can't like prompt me and then be like, no, I didn't prompt you. Rehana had just noticed that there was a scene that was sort of first drafty that had always been there, but that was more kind of reflecting back on the previous scenes as opposed to like pushing the action forward. And so she was like, you should maybe cannibalize that and stick it into the previous scene, which I did. So it was weird to go from essentially like a working car that was driving in La Jolla, and then literally on the plane over here, I took apart the car the day before I had to drive it again. And so first day of rehearsal, there were 40 new pages because I took apart the first act. And so I just have to really listen to audiences and to sort of smart collaborators and and then I'd respond that way. Yeah.
The question was whether the design was part of the script, or who was responsible for the projections, for the set, and all the stuff going on staging wise.
Yeah, most of that is from the designers and from the director, and I just love this design team. Like, they're some of my favorite designers, and the director, we've been working together for 10 years, and but for Wilson Chinn's set especially, he's Asian American designer, and I thought that he really got the kind of cultural precepts that I was bringing to it and sort of captured it in a really smart way. But he also is working out his drafts, so he had to reconceive some of it from Atlanta to here. We felt like China was being too exoticized in the second act, and so then instead of the factories that are there now, it used to be kind of more fantastical, and we really wanted to ground it a little bit more. And so it's coming from just these brilliant designers and from a director that's really sharp.
Okay, there are two gentlemen here who've been waiting. Let's go there and there. Yes. So the gentleman asked asked Mike to talk about the shift in tone, really, from the first act to the second act.
I mean, I think that if the sort of central question of the play is about people that have dual identities, that the first act is meant to kind of cover how this family doesn't quite fit in America, and the second act is meant to cover how they don't quite fit in China, and how the sort of some of the values that they believe are Chinese are actually maybe family specific, and some of so it's just that split between acts is meant to sort of be the entirety of their supposed culture, and then kind of what they come out with is sort of every family is their own culture.
Yes, sir. The question is, how are we playwrights supporting ourselves? Who wants to take that?
Let's open it up.
Open it up.
Well, I guess we all have different ways of supporting ourselves. We're all artists. Some of us are different types of artists as well. For instance, I'm an actor as well as a playwright, so I bounce back and forth. And then I do a lot of really bizarre and random jobs.
Yeah, and I have, okay, I work as an administrator at Columbia University, so I have a day job, like a normal day job.
Well, it's sort of a mixture of a couple of things, productions or grants, residencies, but I figured out itinerant right now, so that's helps.
I do a lot of teaching, actually, lately. I've been teaching.
I'll save for Rehana because we're financially tight.
I just quit my job. I am a now freelance advertising copywriter. My latest account was Samsung.
So you quit it
right before the phone blew up. So a winner is me.
I normally have an office day job, and I just got laid off in the middle of the summer, so I live off of unemployment. And I also happen to coincidentally have a commission to write the play that I'm currently working on. So that will be paying the next 2 months of rent. And after that, I don't know what's going to happen.
I mastermind a crazy spreadsheet that calculates every piece of income that Mike and I get from like $5 to $20. Woo! But I guess right before the birth of our child, we were like, we're gonna die. This baby's gonna be born, and then we're all gonna die. And then we got the residency, which has staved us for 3 years. And I've held probably about 30 different freelance jobs so far. And Mike has held like one job. But yeah, and he writes a lot.
Okay, yes. The question was about the portrayal of China as somewhat fantastical or mythical or strange.
I mean, I think that in my conception, at least, both are fantastical, and I know that it's easier to sort of glom onto the like sort of outwardly fantastical elements of Act Two and think that sort of there's more of that being done. But I think that like this is not your typical American workplace either, and it's not your typical relationship. Hopefully, you know, so. So that's part of it. The other thing is that I think that there are two American Chinese people who are going to China and having that filter, and so it's meant to be a China that's like filtered through people who are not taking a kind of one-to-one of the place that they're in. Like, they're tourists, and so yeah. Does that make sense? I think that that's absolutely like a danger. And in Atlanta, we had a talk back with like a bunch of Emory students that were studying from abroad from China, and they had exactly the same question, like, why did you choose to portray China in this way? And I mean, I can't. I tried to sort of couch that risk, but I think you have to be a really active listener in this play, and there's a lot of irony in it, and so. I mean to backstop some of those questions, but if you're just sort of popcorn eating through the whole thing, you could very well miss it, and that's terrible. But I don't know what to say. Like,
Yes.
yeah. Yeah. Right, and it's something that we're still sort of toggling tonally, because I think that I missed it a little bit the first time around.
The question is, where does Tiger Style go from here?
I don't know. I'm gonna just work as hard as I can here, and then we'll see. No, I mean, I'm coming off of back-to-back productions of it, and so I'm gonna just spend some time with my baby, and we'll.
Be a dad.
We'll see.
Be a dad, Mike.
If he remembers who I am.
All right, are there? We'll do two more. Oh no. Okay. So we'll do these three. 1, 2, 3. Go. The question was, Mike had commented earlier about finessing the ending, and so the question was, what were the different types of endings that were in previous versions of the play?
I mean, I think that there's, since there's like so many questions kind of floating through this play, that there's been versions of the ending where the family all kind of hugs it out, and I think that there's still like a larger kind of social justice question that's still present, that's not satisfied by the family hugging it out, and I think that you see a family that's sort of like, we're okay, and then the audience is let out the hook and they go run away, and they're like, you know, everything's fine and racism's solved. And then there's like kind of like the more hardcore ending where it's like, Albert's like goes through this customs scene and he's like really put into an existential crisis and inconsolable with his family, and then that also like, you know, was a little too hardcore, and people sort of don't know what to make of it, because I don't know what to make of institutional structural racism either. And so this version, I mean, so it's been like these really wide swings, and because there's the sort of internal sort of self-discovery journey that Jennifer goes through, and then there's kind of like the larger social questions that Albert goes through, and then there's also this family play, and it's a play that's in reference to other American family plays of other cultures, and all of which is to say that, like, you know, I mean, that's a lot to pack into like these 3 pages, and so we've been in Atlanta. I threw like 7 endings at them, and in La Jolla, I think I threw like 3 of them, and I've given them at least 2, and I won't go up to 7, but I won't promise that I won't go to 7.
Somewhere in the middle, yes. The question was about the 3 actors who portray multiple parts who are not protagonists, and what the thought process was behind that multiple casting.
I think that they're all sort of aspects of, they're like they're fragmented aspects of these 2 people's psyches, I guess. There's meant to be glimmers of like the, you know, like the mom and the cousin and the therapist, and like the dad and Sichuan, and, you know, like, so I sort of have these pestering furies that kind of follow them, and that show up in different forms, but are essentially the same spirits around them, if that makes sense.
There was more. Yes. So the question was that there's an article about, what is the article called? It's in the program, right?
Oh yeah, there's like an interview with my parents. Yeah.
There was a comment in the article in your program where Mike said the play was not about his mother. Wait, I've lost. It was a very funny question. Where Mike's mother enjoyed the play and said that she found it very hilarious, but it wasn't really about her. And Mike, what is your response to that?
I mean, it's funny because I like almost every play that I've written, she's been like, that character is me, and then the one that's like most directly autobiographical, she's like, that ain't me, and so I don't know what to say. I actually wanted to know whether, you know, since this is like so specific to like my family, but I was wondering about for the rest of y'all, like whether you were tiger parented.
Oh, well, I mean, my parents are Filipino, so we don't have tiger parents. We're not tiger parented. No.
I'll speak for my people. Yeah.
I mean, there are harsh parents, but there's not the philosophy, the idea of the tiger parent is just not something.
Yeah,
in
I
the
mean, my parents
Philippines.
would never call it tiger parenting, but when I would come home from school with my 98, you know, my mom, I got a 98 on my math test, she'd be like, where are the other 2 points? So I guess, yes, I was.
My mom just said, do what makes you happy. And that's like more of a curse, I think, than being told what you need to do.
I wasn't, but I had a cousin who lived literally around cousins who lived literally around the corner who were, from my dad's side of the family, because my dad was the baby of the family, and my uncle's family, he was the eldest, and his eldest son was a golden child because he went to like Harvard and Wharton and everything, and he was the standard in which we were like, well, yeah, that's sort of the model, and then my sisters and I were like, yeah, nah.
My parents were more of the do what makes you happy type of parents, but I did have the experience of if I ever got a B, my dad would say, you know, anyone who can get a B can get an A. So there was like a tiger parenting light type of thing, I guess. I don't know, really light.
I mean, you were horrified by my childhood. You were just let run wild. So you know the answer.
Because you're half Filipino. All right. I think, are we good? Thank you all for coming. Please tell your friends about Tiger Style. And it was great to see you.